Mark West, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today to join me on the Security Equation.
Well, thank you, Dan. Really happy to be here.
So, Mark, give the audience a little about your background, because it's a very unique one. As we talked about earlier, we got two guys that are in the security industry that both have computer science degrees, which is probably the most abnormal thing in the industry. But you go from that to firefighting to your role today. So just take us back a little bit and tell us how you got here.
Sure. So, I started out in computers. It was something I was interested in when I was in junior high school. So I was introduced to them at the early days of my education, and went to school for it, graduated, got a job in computers. So I was doing some programming. And then, there was a fire station close to my house, and I thought, oh, that looks like fun. So I'll go try that for a while. And, so I had this technology background, but now I was doing something completely different. Awesome. Did that for a while, and ended up coming here to Las Vegas because my wife was moving here, and she was in the gaming industry, and this is the place to go. So I was raising our son. Then I got an opportunity to go to work with the MGM organization and get into the security business. And so, my public safety background, having been an emergency manager back in Pennsylvania, right, kind of led, into that security aspect. And then I've just grown the opportunity from there. So, I've been fortunate that I've been able to do some different things, and continue to apply my technology background and knowledge, which is, as we see now, what's happening in security is there's more and more technology being applied. Yeah. And trying to tease out, what's the really valuable technology? What's the stuff that actually works and makes our job better and makes us more efficient and more effective versus it looks really cool, but
we talk about how do you operationalize technology, right? Because there is you come to ISC West and you see all these fancy toys, and you're like, I like that, but operationalizing it is the key, and your team must do a very good job because the amount of technology you must have or use or need for hotel, casinos, convention centers, arena, crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, look, it doesn't really matter so much what the application is because the core technologies are the same, right? You want access control systems, you want cameras so you can observe, you want to have systems that'll do some kind of recognition. Now we're getting into AI where the computer can be smarter, and instead of having an operator sitting in front of a screen full of a wall full of screens, that operator can get alerts and be told, hey, something interesting may have just happened on monitor number 3.
Pay attention here.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that there is necessarily something there, but at least it filters out a lot of the noise.
For sure. Give the listeners a reality check. Casino security operations center. Is it what they see on TV? Is it all of that? Is it like you're really watching tables and people that might be nefarious just in their gambling habits?
Yeah, I would say across the industry, yeah, there's a lot of interesting technology at use. There's still a lot of people involved in monitoring that technology, but the systems are getting smarter. Yep. We have to continually evolve as an industry just to stay ahead of it.
Yeah. Your role now, you have 20 properties that you have overall security responsibility for across the U.S.
Yeah, so I work in our corporate security group, which supports the property operations team. So my function is a couple of different things. I do special event planning, so large multi-property events, things that are across the city or across the country. New Year's Eve is an example. Right. The F1 race is an example. When the Super Bowl came here to Las Vegas, we were involved in our component of planning that.
Right.
I also do technology assessment. So because of my unique background or somewhat unique background, I look at those technologies and I try to help my colleagues who aren't necessarily as technology enabled to, weed through the things that will probably be more interesting for them. Right. So I don't want them getting a lot of phone calls from vendors, salespeople that say, hey, I've got this great new technology and you should buy it. Right. That doesn't help us because we'll get inundated.
Yeah.
like any other company in the world gets inundated with, salespeople. But because I have this kind of split background where I can look at security applications, I can look at how we operationalize it, but I can look at the core technologies and say, is it really ready yet? You know, and my work partner and I kind of divide up that responsibility, and we both take a critical eye on these things and say, yeah, we think this is now mature enough that we should be taking a look.
Right. And here's how it could really help us. Right. There's an ROI in all these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But go back. You weren't just in the fire department. You rose to a commander type level, or and said, did you just retire from fire? You got to that point, or you said, I want a new challenge?
A little bit of both. So I got to the point where I had done a lot of things in the fire service. I had specialized in structural firefighting and in vehicle rescue technician. I was an officer, so I had my own truck. I actually got to be Captain 51 responding on Squad 51.
That's
so it was
awesome.
like I, geeked out on that.
What lessons or experiences that you learned in fire quickly made sense to you when you got into security space, especially the commercial security space?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, obviously there's some immediate applications, right? So medical response, for example,
sure,
or just sizing up a situation, being able to say, I'm walking up to a scene, I don't know exactly what's happening yet. I need to go figure it out before I jump into the middle of it.
Right. Right? Assessment.
Assessment. Yeah, exactly. So, in fire service, we call that size up, and you come to the property or, whatever it is that's going on, and you look at it from all the way around.
Yep.
And then you start making decisions about how you're going to respond to it rather than just running into the middle of it.
Right.
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 Same kind of thing in security. If we were responding to, let's say a disruptive guest. Right. Before you get into the middle of dealing with the disruptive guest, you need to understand, who is this person and why are they upset, and what else may be going on, and
right.
What are at least a few of the factors that you might have to deal with. Is it one person or is it multiple people?
Correct.
Are you going to be able to address it yourself, or be able, need other people to help? Right.
Yours is a very unique role because of the different types of security situations you must deal with. You have hotels. There's some unique things that happen in hotels. You have casinos. There's unique things that happen there. And then you've got events happening in your convention centers, your arenas, etc. Blending that team together and finding the right team and building that team. Talk a little bit about how you find the right people for those different roles, and do you have team members that are dealing with all three types of properties, or do they tend to be, that's a good hotel guy, that's a good casino guy, or that's a good event guy?
Yeah, I would say that, in the first part of the question, how do we find people? It's first off, it's people who have an interest in this, right? Whether it's they're at the early part of their career, they're somewhere in the middle, or maybe they're later in their career. But they're interested in having this role, which is security, but is also largely guest services, right? In our business, right, most of what we do is guest service. Yep. If I've got somebody who's working in a convention center or in an arena, most of the questions they ask are, where's the hot dog? Where can I get a Starbucks? Where's the elevator? Where's the bathroom? Right. It's not a lot of necessarily security-based things right away. The casino and hotel operations are a little different because, the guest interaction is a little different, but still it's a lot of helping people around the property and where to go. So, finding people who express an interest in that, who have the desire to engage. Yeah. Right. They can't really be too standoffish. Right. Because again, it's guest services. Right. Yeah. For sure. That's a big part of our business. Then, kind of, do people specialize? Well, there is a little bit of that. I'd say that certain kinds of people are more inclined to be interested in event-based work as opposed to regular work. So you've got people who are kind of, semi-retired, and they're happy to work 2 nights a week, or 5 days a month, or 10 days a month, whatever it happens to be. Exactly. But others are looking for full-time work. Right. So you've got those dynamics going on.
The different events you guys see, you've got your everyday 24/7 operations of a hotel or a casino, and then a large special event, like you said, when Formula One comes, it's that time of year, or a Super Bowl comes. How does that impact your team? Because I don't think, I've been involved in 13 Super Bowls. We were the lead security consultant on the first Formula One. I don't think those of us that are in that true kind of special event security space really understand or embrace your team's expertise that you bring to the table, because it's not like we're playing the game at your hotel or the race is at your hotel, right? So I think there's a lack of integration at times, although Las Vegas is probably the most the hotel group is very tight. And you guys share a lot of information. Especially, I learned this during the Formula One with Metro. You guys are all pretty well connected, but in other markets, it's not the same. So, how do you approach the differences?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you're right. In the Las Vegas market, we're somewhat unique in that we've got so many events so often. We do a dozen events a week.
Yeah.
Some cities do a dozen events a year.
Right.
And we're doing things like the Super Bowl and F1 and, large scale things routinely. So our interaction with law enforcement partners, with other public safety partners, with our other operating partners up and down the strip has to be tight. And, in a security and safety sense, we aren't competing in this space.
Right.
We're all collaborating together. What we do, what we bring at each of our areas is knowledge of our property.
Yeah.
All right, so we know how we work, and we kind of know how things will work with our neighbors. We know how things will work with our public safety partners. There still needs to be some amount of coordination, but what we bring from a special event planning perspective is we know what we're bringing to the table. We know how we're going to get there. We know what our challenges need to be, what our risks are that we're going to try to manage or mitigate. And how we go forward from that. I'd say, in other cities that maybe don't do as many events, spending a little more time having those conversations outside of the context of an event.
Right.
And saying, have a quarterly meeting that says, let's get everybody together and just talk about stuff.
Right.
Don't wait till it's a week out from the Super Bowl and try to figure it out.
It's an interesting point because, look, that's been a theme with connecting with law enforcement. I go back to like 9/11, and that was one of the big lessons learned is, private venues were not as connected to their law enforcement partners as they need to be. And I would say it's still a challenge in some markets. But what I still see is private venues who aren't even talking to their neighbor, right? I've got a stadium here and an arena here and a big public space over here, and I might go do some consulting with the stadium, and I'll ask them what's going on at the other, and they're like, I don't know. Do you know the guys? I really don't.
Yeah.
Wow. But you guys all are pretty tight in Las Vegas as far as, and I thought your point about, from the security perspective, you're not competing. Your parent company and their parent company might be competing brand for that business, but at the end of the day, someone got the business, someone else got this, but your neighbors, and it's whatever it is, it's impacting all of you. It's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, I've seen that when I've gone to training classes, for example, talking about emergency management, emergency planning. We're here in Las Vegas. If we all get together, we all pretty much know each other. Now we'll be meeting the new people who are, recently coming into the city or recently changing responsibilities or whatever. But we keep that network going. But the instructors have commented for us. When we go to Indianapolis, we don't see this kind of cooperation between the university stadium and, something else down the street. Right. And, and they ask us kind of the same question. How do you do that? How do you start to break down the wall or how do you get it going? And, I think for us, some of it's just we have networks here. Yeah. We have regular groups that meet. So whether it's InfraGard or ASIS or the Las Vegas Chiefs Association or, insert group here, there's a lot of organizations that get together on a fairly regular basis and meet, discuss, do some planning, but more importantly, build relationships.
I'm assuming that started before you got into this role.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. It's been here for decades.
Do you think, I'm just curious, how did it start? Was it, I'm going to go with my nefarious casino mind. Is it because the same knuckleheads are going from this casino to that casino and that casino and they're like sharing information? Or how do you think it really, how did Las Vegas get to where they've got this nice network of cooperation amongst the different facilities?
It's an interesting question. And I can really only, personally, I can only talk back to about 2012, in my own experience. But, I'd have to kind of guess before that. I think there probably is an aspect of we're all kind of in the same business, so we can talk. But I think that interaction and the cooperation is much different now than it was, say, 10 years ago,
Sure.
20 years ago, 30 years ago. If you go back 30 years, I don't think there was quite as much.
Yeah.
But that's a guess. I don't know for sure.
Do you poach each other's good staff? You're like, oh, that guy's doing pretty good over there, but I know Jimmy pretty well. Is there like, I think it just came to my mind that maybe that's why in some regions you don't get that cooperation because they're going to poach each other's good staff.
Yeah, we don't poach people from the other teams, but certainly people do move around.
Sure.
Looking for opportunities. So if you're upwardly mobile in any industry, and you've got 10 different companies that are all kind of doing the same thing, you look for, that director position,
sure.
the executive director position, the whatever it is position. That's, partly how you can move around.
Just while we're on it, before we move on, I've been asked this question a lot of times, and so I want to pose it to you. What would your advice be to a young person who thinks they want to be in the security industry? How do they get in, and what would you tell them is their best chance for success?
I think the best chance for success for people coming into this industry is first having a great attitude. Again, if you look at Las Vegas and our focus on the hospitality industry, anywhere you're going to work, you're going to be asked to be an ambassador for your employer.
The brand, for sure.
And so having that positive attitude is certainly going to help. Look for training opportunities. Learn as much as you can to make sure that you can do your job well, that you can do your job safely, and that you can assist people when they need help.
Right.
And if you're doing that, then the opportunities for you may be, kind of a little bit of what you make of it too. You keep your eyes open and say, hey, I'd really like to be a bike officer, or, I'd like to get into dispatch, or I'd like to be a report writer, or I want to be a supervisor, So these are all different paths that somebody can take in the industry.
Right.
And one of the things I think is kind of interesting as I look at Las Vegas as I step back and look at it in the larger picture, there's many, many stories about people who started off in what seems like a mundane position and then, 30 years later are an executive director of whatever.
Right.
Right.
Or less than 30 years.
Yeah. Or less than 30 years. But you can look around and you can see that over and over and over again. And so this at least is a town, and it's an opportunity for people to really make what they want out of themselves.
Right. Talk about InfraGard a little bit. I don't know a lot about it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that a lot of my colleagues know much more than the name.
Okay.
Why InfraGard? What is it? And what do you get out of it as you're the president of the XYZ chapter, but why InfraGard?
So InfraGard is a partnership between individuals who have an interest in protecting the critical infrastructure of the United States, and it's a cooperation with the FBI. So it's based around 75 chapters across the country that are attached. Each chapter is attached to a local field office or a regional office of the FBI. And it's educational opportunity, it's networking opportunity. Again, it's a way of sharing information, of, contributing back to kind of the larger picture of what it is we do, within our community.
Right.
And, I see that reproduced across the country, So San Diego has a very large chapter. Las Vegas has a smaller chapter. Los Angeles has a big chapter. San Francisco has a big chapter. Some of the chapters on the East Coast, again, very large, very active.
Right.
And so there's ways to get involved, and it's another way to meet people.
Yeah. Being that it's connected to the FBI, are you getting unclassified intel? Are they pushing information out through InfraGard?
There is information that gets pushed out, and there's also information we can pull. So
right.
Having been vetted through the process, once you're accepted as a member, you have access to a portal,
yep.
a website,
right.
Where you can go in and collect information. Most of it's it's unclassified, perhaps sensitive.
Yep.
Nothing at a higher level than that, unless you have other clearances, and that would really be beyond the scope of InfraGard. So, but it is a way of collecting some information and of getting interesting reports. So the FBI routinely produces internal reports that it distributes to the InfraGard membership, as well as other people, in the law enforcement areas, and those reports can be talking about cybercrime. They can be talking about, scamming that's going on in an area. We had a report that was generated by the local field office here about 2 years ago, where they were talking about this targeted focus, where these cyber criminals were focusing on smaller doctors' offices. They were calling doctors' offices and getting into their networks as a way of jumping into the larger hotel network.
Right.
So, if you look at University Medical Center here, they've got a great team of people that protect their systems. But the smaller doctor's office that's affiliated
right.
doesn't necessarily have those resources, right? And so they're a smaller target, but an easier target.
Sure.
And, so raising awareness in the FBI and its report is raising awareness for that.
Sure.
And then collecting those doctors who probably wouldn't think about it otherwise, because it's not,
no,
it's not their thing. Telling them, and they can go out and then take action and protect themselves and protect their patients.
Wow. It's a good example. MGM Center of Excellence. Talk about that. What is it? What are you guys trying to achieve? How's it going?
Well, so each of our centers of excellence, we have 12 to 15 of them, are focused around certain kind of service area. So in the security center of excellence, for example, what we're focusing on is how do we improve our collective, service offering? How do we provide a better guest experience? How do we improve the safety and security of our properties for our employees and for our guests?
Right.
And so what are those things that we can be doing from a corporate level, which is, a fairly small support group that, again, is supporting those operating teams out at the properties. But we're able to sit back and think about some of the larger questions and look at the technologies and do the evaluations and come up with the reports, and support, investigations or intelligence collection.
Is it training focused?
There is some training, yeah. So we have a fairly substantial training group within our security COE that provides the training for all of our officers.
It's great. I think, one of the challenges that we have right now, and a lot of companies like ours or any event company, is that training, that recruiting, training, coaching. Because 5 years ago, it was me and Calvin Graber and Paul Matthews and Paul Padilla, and we go handle anything. But now we're at a certain size where it's not me. Mm-hmm. I'm trying for it not to be Calvin and Paul Matthews, and so we're it's a challenge to give the right people the right experience, give them the right responsibility to get that experience, but also make sure we maintain that standard and that service level. Because like you said, we're in the guest services business, mm-hmm. right? A lot of the events that we focus on are more of that business conference. So you're really in that white glove security. Now we want it very secure and very safe, but we have to make sure that we're meeting that event objective and meeting that attendee experience while keeping it safe and secure. So the training piece, it's a challenge all the time.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to for any management team to think about is how much time can you focus on doing training and making sure that you're giving people enough.
Right.
You don't want to give them too much because that takes away if you're charging by the hour for the business, right? You don't want to give them too much. But at the same time, it's really important that people stay current, that there's refresher training, whether it's skills training, whether it's defensive tactics, whether it's verbal judo, any of these kinds of things that are about de-escalating and keeping a situation safe. Those are all very important, and people need to practice those skills.
For sure.
Because if I spend my entire year explaining where the Starbucks is, how to get a hot dog, and where the bathroom is, I'm not going to do very well when that person comes up and starts creating a problem.
Well, I had the opposite experience this morning because I'm in our ops center for the event we're doing, and I'm really in the back row, right? And I'm not supposed to get involved. And it wasn't very fun for me because I'm watching a wall of monitors and I'm watching the guys manage it, and I'm like, God, I want to go jump in. I feel like I could maybe make that better over there, but I also wasn't involved in the planning process. I don't know the timings and everything, but I looked at Calvin and I said, I don't enjoy sitting here. This is not fun for me. I might have some control issues.
Yeah.
So you brought up cyber, and your entity went through a pretty serious cyber incident just a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. What lessons learned? What was the operational impact of that? Forget about the technology side. Mm-hmm. How did that impact your operation and your team?
Yeah. So, we probably read in the news that we had, a fairly substantial impact to business operations. So people couldn't get into hotel rooms for a short period of time, or, they had difficulty using the ATMs because the computer network was down. It was hard to check in or check out of the hotel. So, things like that, which were real business impacts and lasted for several weeks. So the couple of lessons I think were, first, having a good plan is extremely important. Exercising that plan is extremely important. Your ability to recover your business depends on you having a plan that you've exercised, that you've challenged, that you've been honest about, and said, we need to do better in these areas, right? The 80% of the plan's good, but these 20%, need some help. Right.
And so I think what, our teams were able to do was utilize the plans that we had, execute on them. The recovery started fairly quickly. It did take an somewhat extended period of time. But along the way, we stayed in business.
Right.
Had you, I used to do a lot of exercising, and I had a firm belief, I still do, whether you're exercising the exact scenario that took place, the exercise taught the right communication and decision-making, who's going to make these decisions, so you didn't have somebody jump out and be like, well, I'm going to do this now. So I think there's a ton of value in just exercising. And look, when the lights went out at the Super Bowl, I was very involved with the NFL, and I was running their exercises. And Frank Sapovitz was the senior VP of events. Mm-hmm. 10 days prior to that game, I ran that exercise. I got talked out of doing a power scenario by the building engineer. Mm-hmm. So we didn't exercise power outage, but after that thing finished, Frank very clearly said it was because of the exercising that we knew exactly what to do, who was going to do what, and what communication decision-makings were going to happen. So there's a ton of value regardless if you get the scenario right. Look, there was another one that affected Microsoft, and it affected a friend of mine, Jim Mercurio, who was running casino in Northern California at the time. And I talked to him, and it was, a shorter outage that was cyber related, but it took down all their systems. And he said he was staying at the casino that night, and he got a phone call, and he had to go down and go get handfuls of cash and paper receipts and go start paying people out because of the systems going down. I thought, what an experience! Like that had to be interesting. But I assume you had at least exercised through not being able to access rooms and stuff like that, and how you guys would manage it. So I'm sure it all came together. But the key was doing exercising so people knew.
Yeah, and I think your point is a very good one, that you don't have to exercise exactly the scenario, right? You don't need to know it's going to be just like this and like this and like this, because quite frankly, the exercise is never going to be just like what it is 100%. That happens in the world.
Yeah.
So you have to at least know what you're doing is creating that model.
Yep.
The operating model in which you know who's going to be involved, you know who's going to be making decisions, and you know who eventually has the final decision.
Right.
Because that's the really important person.
Jim Steig, when he was running the Super Bowl, when I first got involved, he said, Dan, I need you to come up with the right exercise, because the year before, he actually said, he goes, we have too many Alexander Haggs on our team, and they just start making decisions on their own without communicating up. And I'm like, okay, I understand the objective now. Talk about, switch to major events and conferences. When a major event comes in, like a large conference, like what are the first things that you do with your team? Because you're getting information in advance. And I mean, let's go back to Formula One. Mm-hmm. We came in maybe 9 months out to start the security planning. And I think one of the first visits I had was to your quarterly hotel security director meeting. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have a lot of answers.
Right.
But I'm sure you guys had a lot of questions, and I'm sure that news comes out and you start seeing it and you're like, what are these guys actually doing? How do you prepare your team even if you don't have all those answers yet?
Again, a great question. That first year was, a lot of, we've got 1,000 questions and you've got 13 answers, and we're going to figure it out from here. One of the things, just in terms of organizing or addressing any kind of situation like that, is understanding the scope.
Right.
What are all the things that we need to do? So we started coming up with just lists of the questions and lists of our concerns, things that we weren't necessarily sure were going to be risks.
Right.
But we'd never really thought about it before. And so, is this going to be a risk or is this not going to be a risk? And if it is a risk, how do we mitigate it? Right?
Yeah.
And so we could start putting those lists together and having those conversations in cooperation with your team, with your folks who were working with the Las Vegas Grand Prix teams, and everybody else that was involved in it. And our law enforcement partners and public safety partners, and ad nauseum.
Right.
But that first year, it kind of came together at the day of the event. As you sort of would expect for the first time. The second year was better,
I'm sure.
And, the third year has been better than that. So
I remember when we got involved and I got told we're going to this meeting and be careful what you're going to get asked, because we didn't have a lot of answers. I mean, we just started and there was a lot of questions that we had. How challenging was it where you had properties inside of that track and knowing that perimeter was that greater perimeter was going to get shut down? Mm. So getting your employees in, getting your guests in, getting your logistics of food and beverage, like how big of an exercise is that?
It's big. Now, we are fortunate at MGM, we are track adjacent,
right? But
we're on the outside.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have any that are inside the circle. But that still means that Las Vegas Boulevard is closed, Harmon is closed, Koval is closed, right? And so those are all affecting certain of our properties. And that means that access for guests is interrupted. Access for deliveries can be interrupted.
Right.
Access for emergency response is interrupted. So all these things need to be planned out.
Yep.
And it's a multi-day event, which has opening and closing of the roads throughout the course of the day and, every night. So there's a lot of moving parts. Which made that first year very exciting. That's in part why I say that, year 2 and year 3 have gone better, because, we exercised those things. We learned a lot in year 1. I think we collectively learned a lot in year 1. We were able to apply that in year 2, refine it. And so now by the time we get to year 3, we're pretty good at it.
Right.
Every year is going to take some amount of planning because there's always going to be something different. But there's a lot that we can pick up with and say, There's a lot here already.
Yeah. Look, the Las Vegas Grand Prix group, hats off. I mean, it was very ambitious to get done that first year with all the road work, and you're shutting down a city's circulation. And so to roll that out and say, we're going to do this here in a city like Las Vegas, this isn't like going and putting a track around Minneapolis or Detroit or, like Las Vegas. It was very ambitious, and look, year one came off very well for the race and the spectators and the people, the TV and, everything. So it was great. But I am sure it was sleepless nights, and I know it was sleepless nights for our team. I'm sure it was for your team and all of your colleagues in this business or in the city.
Yeah. I think everybody from the LVCVA to the Clark County Commissioners to all of Las Vegas Metro Police and everybody else, Clark County Fire, we're all having the same sort of anxiety.
But I got to tell you, I've been in a lot of big event op centers, and what ended up getting built and organized for the Grand Prix and the cooperation from Metro, from the sheriff down, Clark County, just from the connection from our op center to Las Vegas Metro, and then the broader footprint, another op center, hourly check-in calls, video with Chief Dory and Lieutenant Bell, and I mean, it was so refreshing to have that kind of cooperation. And I'm pretty sure you guys were doing something similar, between your groups. We didn't have to interact directly, on race days, but it was, I tell other people at other events, it was probably the best cooperation of all the different partners and pieces that had to move, and staying abreast of everything that was going on, especially when the first practice night, we have this long delay, and we can't even have guests back in the
Yeah.
The cooperation was phenomenal. It was great.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, kind of a testament to who we are in Las Vegas and how we work together and the history that we've built as a collective group of people all working towards the same goal.
It was great. If you had to pinpoint, one topic, like when you talk about events, like where do you think risk gets underestimated and not addressed, and then there's that overreaction because it wasn't planned for, and sometimes there's an overreaction.
Yeah. So I think, the things that if you look at an event and you step back from it and you start thinking about what's the craziest thing I could think of?
Right.
Let me go plan for that. Right.
Right.
And you can do that a couple of times, but you can't do that ad infinitum.
Right.
And so, I remember a particular incident that I kind of flash back to where we had a UFC event at T-Mobile Arena. The fighter jumped out of the ring and attacked somebody who was down in this, in the seats. And we had, security in place and police and all kinds of presence to keep people from going into the ring.
Right.
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 And that was the UFC's focus, and that was our focus, and that was PD's focus, and it was everybody else's focus. And then suddenly, I see this guy leaping out of the octagon. And, I thought, didn't expect that,
right.
And then again, so that could have been a very, it could have been, a troubling moment. But within, I don't know, half a minute, we had it under control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what we were just doing was people were exiting the arena. There wasn't a mad panic. Police responded and they did their part, and the medical teams responded and they did their part. Our security teams, responded and did their part to get people out. The ushers got people out. So, within just a few minutes, we had cleared the building.
Right.
And resolved the incident. Now, we had never planned for that. Right.
It's so interesting you bring that up, because so often we don't do that. And a long time ago, I was involved in some courthouse consulting, and there was an incident in Atlanta. If anybody remembers the Atlanta, it was Brian Nichols, and he's on trial. And it was a long trial, so he had gone from the holding cells below the courthouse up, to the courtroom many of times. He knew the path. He knew exactly what to do, and he overpowered a deputy, got her radio and her weapon. And one of the things that the courthouse security team, the sheriff's department, had never really thought of or practiced, an inmate escapes, they leave. He went hunting. So they'd never, no one had thought through. First of all, if the inmate can overpower a deputy and get free, they're going to run. Is everybody's thought, right?
Sure.
But your UFC example made me remember that one. And so they didn't have a response for an inmate overpowering somebody and then circulating through the building to find targets that he had on his list. And that's what happened. So it's a great point to think through the things that you just don't think could happen. Look, the arena business is a very interesting business, and you get everything: concerts, fights, sports, the whole thing. What lessons from T-Mobile did you bring to the corporate side of hotels and casinos and convention centers?
Well, so T-Mobile's a great operating environment, and kind of unique within the MGM set of properties.
Sure.
So we have a lot of these hotel, casino properties, and a few entertainment venues. And because entertainment is different, the people show up, they have a ticket, they come to an event, and they leave 6 hours later.
Right.
And the whole building's empty.
Right.
Well, that doesn't happen in a hotel. So that process of how do you get people in? How do you move a large mass of people in, keep them safe within there, have planned for, any number of types of man-made or natural hazards.
Yep.
So you got your all hazards approach to everything. And then get them out at the end so they've had an enjoyable experience and they go home and everybody's, had a good day.
Right.
Taking the lessons out of that so now what can we learn about the hotel?
Sure.
Right. So what can we do about moving large groups of people in? Because, there are times when we get masses of people moving through the casino floor.
Sure.
And how do we manage that? If they're, for example, going to a convention and there's several thousand people all going down to the convention hall at the same time because the keynote starts at 8:00.
Right.
So at 7:45, they're all filing down that long hallway.
I know that hallway.
Yeah, you do. How do you make sure that they can get through in a timely manner so they get where they want to go, but you're keeping them safe and making sure that, we're exercising good, security posture.
Right.
I think those are, some of the ways that we can translate over.
Does it include putting more baristas at the Starbucks so that line goes faster so we can get them out of that hallway?
Yeah, well, I think mobile ordering was the solution that they came up with.
It has helped, I'm sure. Before I talk to you about the future of security, let's talk about what was your toughest day in the industry and what lessons did you learn from it?
Well, I'll go back to that example of the fighter jumping out of the ring. In that second, I was in the control room. I'm watching this unfold on TV, basically.
Right.
And, it's a couple hundred feet away from me, but, I'm not right there. Immediately, I had to start thinking, how are we going to respond to this? So we had to take certain actions to protect parts of the building and then try to get people moving so they could leave safely.
Right. So the fight's over.
The fight's over.
Okay.
Yeah. The
night's over.
The fight was over. That was the last fight of the day. The night's over.
Got it.
It just happened to be that these two people had a grudge and, the fighter decided to do his thing. In terms of my, as the security manager for that event, I took it as my serious responsibility that I needed to do something, right? I needed to take some action. I needed to tell people what to do.
Right.
I needed to start directing my team to do something. And so for the first, 10 seconds, it's kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then, started, going back to my training, right? And so what do I need to do? Well, I need to make sure we have communications. I need to get PD involved. They were already involved. I mean,
Sure.
It wasn't like I had to go tell them.
Sure.
They saw it on the same TV I did.
Sure.
But I had to make sure our medical people who were not watching it
Yep.
knew that there could be the potential of something going on. So start staging those groups, or at least getting some awareness amongst the different teams that were going on. Got our managers together and said, okay, here's what we need to do. Now we have an operating plan. So these people are doing this thing. These people are doing this thing. We're doing this thing. And our goal is to keep this as, safe and reasonable as possible and help people get out.
Right.
Right.
You look back at that, what would you change?
To be honest, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
It happens like that.
It happens so fast.
Right.
And it's one of those events where I couldn't ever have anticipated it was going to happen. I mean, now I do.
Right.
And so, the interesting thing is the security team from the promoter, who had also never had that happen.
Right.
And, we met after and said, okay, so in the future, here's what we need to make, the little adjustment that we need to make sure that nothing like this happens again.
Right.
And, so it had to do more with placing where we placed officers and how we just kind of controlled the area so that we had a little better control.
Sure.
But, what would I change? I don't know. I think we were fortunate the way it worked out.
Yep.
We didn't have a big situation.
Right.
We just had a thing happen.
Yeah. Because it could have been a melee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where do you see the future of, security in your industry, whether it's events or, the other stuff that you're doing?
Well, I think that, one of the challenges security always faces is we are seen as a cost, and it's how much are you willing to pay for what's the protection, right?
Right.
And the longer it's been since the last incident, the less people are willing to pay, right? So when something happens, the next day, everybody's like, oh, security, we need lots of it.
What do you need?
And a year later, it's, well, why do you need so many people? And,
right.
I think we need to recognize that is a reality. We can't just put people towards a problem. That's not a solution. That's not a long-term solution. It's what we did 30 years ago.
Yep.
Right? You had a problem, you just drew more people at it.
Right.
And even 15 years ago, it's probably still the solution, although we were starting to see a little bit in terms of technology. I think the technologies now are going to enable us to do a couple of things. One is to make the people who are, the operating resources, the boots on the ground, are going to have more information more quickly to be able to do their jobs effectively. There'll probably continue to be cost pressure, whatever industry you're in.
Sure.
There's always going to be cost pressure to do more with less, which is, I hate saying it, but unfortunately it happens.
Yeah.
I think that part of how we respond to that is to use systems like the AI processors and find those tools that really do help us focus on the critical incidents and the critical events and the things that look like they're serious, as opposed to, somebody just clowning around in the flower bed.
Right.
Or somebody just standing in an elevator, right? That's probably a low risk situation.
Right.
Unless they've been in there for 10 minutes, in which case now it's something of concern. So using the technology to alert us to those things and then respond lets us accomplish that, doing more with less thing, because now we're being more effective with the same number of people or potentially with less.
Yeah.
I think training continues to be important, and looking at ways that we can train our officers to make sure that they're safe first and that they can assist other people effectively. I think that's also terribly important. And, officer injuries, are something that, we pay attention to across the industry. You hate to see somebody hurt.
But you don't hear many people talk about that the way you say it.
No,
like when you've said it a couple of times. Make sure you're safe first. Mm-hmm. Like it's a very interesting nuance because I frankly I don't say it. But if I had an active shooter situation, our briefing is always, take care of yourself and then help everybody around you, right? But that's it. It's interesting that you've said that a couple of times. Like it's a very important piece.
Yeah, it's probably hearkening back to my fire service time. Everything we did was in teams.
Yep.
So it was always 2 people at the minimum.
Right.
And you had to make sure you were safe and your partner was safe.
Right.
You can't help anybody else if you are now the rescue.
Yes.
Right. Once you get hurt, you're no longer helping anybody.
It's such a great point. Such a great point. What do you think every event planner should understand about security? And let me just have you answer that, and then I'm going to close with one more.
Sure. I respect event planners. I've been an event planner. I've played many roles around events. So whether it was production side or event planning or doing other things, and also the security aspect, we are specialists in security, and we have knowledge of our buildings, our risks, our capabilities that event planners will know, but don't know to the depth that we do.
Right.
And I think what we need to do is work in collaboration with those folks who are doing the overall planning and the project management and all the other things, and moving those 1,000 moving parts and making sure they all get done. Well, we provide a really strong leg of the stool that says, we will make sure the security part and the safety part is there for you.
Right.
So rely on us for that. This is what we're going to bring you. Let's work together.
But get us involved early.
Absolutely. Get us involved early from the beginning.
Right.
Security cannot be put off until the day before the event when you go, oh, yeah, we need 30 people. Can you just bring them in? And when I think about that in any of the other examples, so let's look at banqueting. Would you have a dinner for 500 people and say the day before, I think I need 50 waiters?
Right.
You wouldn't, right? You'd plan to have those people in place, and you'd plan to have the chefs and the food and all the other stuff. You wouldn't just suddenly decide, I think we're going to do filet mignon at 5 o'clock.
Right. But that you mentioned banqueter, etc. I'll close with this because I think it's very interesting. You have so many different departments and moving groups within the MGM umbrella, whether it's the hotel side or the casino side or the convention center or the arenas. How do you improve those partnerships with all of those different groups so that they embrace security and safety as part of their roles? Because, frankly, it's not their job until they're kind of informed that it's part of their job.
Right.
How do you what's worked?
Well, I think, see something, say something has worked. Putting up information about that and getting people to be a little more aware of their surroundings.
Yep.
Certainly if somebody comes to us and says, I'm concerned about X, Y, and Z, we can talk to them and, help address their concern. That certainly helps. I think the ongoing communication, again, if we go back to the example of, 2 arenas that are down the street from each other,
right.
Have they ever talked before? Well, no, they probably should. Right. So we need to be talking to our partners within the company just like any other company.
Right.
We need to talk to HR, we need to talk to procurement, we need to talk to banqueting, and we need to talk to every other operations team about what it is that we do, how we can help them, what their concerns are, what are they worried about?
Yeah.
Do they have any security concerns? And if they do, let's address it.
Right.
Let's do it now before it's an incident.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. Years ago, I had a counterpart on the event side, and they said to me, Dan, you guys spend so much time on the guest experience, but I don't think as a collective we're spending enough time on the staff experience, because we're asking them to come in at these, very early hours, stay late hours, and they do have security concerns. Mm-hmm. And when we put the security posture up, we're changing how they get to work, how they leave work. And I thought about it, and I said, you know what, you're right. We just expect that being as you're paid to be here, You just have to follow the process, even if you don't like the process. And so we started interacting more with those departments that the security posture affected their work, and help explain why we had to do this.
Yeah.
And help us, because I can't have banquet tables going down the middle of that one hallway when I've got a keynote to load. So let's work out a plan together, right? So there's a lot of give and take with those partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of the why is extremely important.
For sure.
People will understand security and safety if they know the why.
Right.
But if they just see it as a process that, they don't understand, and it just slows them down from being able to come into work,
right,
then it's going to be sand in their shoe.
Yep.
And
well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time. This has been a great conversation, and I look forward to doing more with you and your full team. They're a pleasure to work with, and I appreciate everything you're doing.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks, man.